Bulletproof Radio, a state of high performance.
Hey, it's Dave Asprey with Bulletproof Radio. Today's cool fact of the day is that all people have about the same number of sweat glands when they're born, but in the first few years of your life, based on the temperature of the air around you, your body determines the optimal number of sweat glands, and that's the number you're going to have for the rest of your life. That means if you grew up in the desert like I did, you're probably going to have a few more sweat glands than like the average person. And if you grew up, say, in the Arctic, you're probably not going to sweat very much. I don't know that you can hack the number of sweat glands you have, and I don't know that you even want to, because your sweat glands also help you detox. But it's kind of cool that the environment programs your body. That's kind of a big thing. It also means that if you don't want to have sweaty kids and you live in a hot environment, maybe you should like put them in a cryotherapy chamber every now and then. There's no evidence for that, but it's a cool idea, right? Before we get started today, you might not know about the Quarterly Box, which is a program that I've been doing for quite a while now. All day, every day, I keep my eyes open looking for really cool biohacking stuff that I don't make mostly, and then I put it together into a gift box. You don't know what you're going to get, but you're going to get something worth way more than what you pay for it. So you can go to quarterly.co/products/Dave Asprey. And you can get the personally curated box of stuff that I think is really cool. And what I do is I call all the vendors and say, hey, would you like to be part of this? We're going to introduce your stuff to a lot of people. So that means that you spend $100 and you get a box that's worth way more than $100. And it's all stuff that's already been pre-vetted by me. So go to quarterly.co/products/Dave Asprey and check it out. You subscribe. And it's one of the most fun things that I get to do, because I find just crazy little things. Sometimes it's supplements, sometimes it's technology, sometimes it's just something that makes life easier. But it's all about making things easier and about using less work to get more benefit, whatever those benefits are. So quarterly.co/products/Dave Asprey, you'll be happy you did it. Today's guest, and I'm not really sure how we're editing this, so we'll figure this out on the fly. But today's guest, sitting next to me, looking lovely, is Izabella Wentz. If you are a longtime listener, you've already heard one podcast with Izabella. And if you're watching on YouTube, you'll notice that we're at the new studio, the Bulletproof Biohacking Labs in my backyard. And Izabella is sitting here next to me. She is not on Skype, so this is going to be an amazing interview. Izabella is a pharmacist and like a major expert in Hashimoto's thyroiditis, which means really she's an expert in energy systems in the body, because your thyroid is what drives energy in the body. So Izabella, thank you for coming up to Vancouver Island to visit me.
Oh, thanks so much for having me, Dave. It's been so much fun biohacking this weekend.
We actually spent all yesterday like doing weird stuff. What was your favorite thing that you did yesterday?
I really like the float tank. That was a lot of fun.
The float tank, cool. It was kind of funny because I realized we didn't have like the proper shampoo and conditioner available for you when you got out. Because for people who haven't done a float tank, what you're doing is you're actually floating in water where there's 1,000 pounds of Epsom salt dissolved, so that the Epsom salt like pushes underneath you and keeps you afloat. Did you have a hard time sinking?
No, I was worried that I wasn't going to be able to, stay afloat. I thought I would sink down to the bottom, but it kept me up.
It really does like push you up. And what experiences did you have when you were sort of just in this dark cocoon-like thing with no sound, no light, just like no sensory input at all? What did you experience?
Just a profound sense of relaxation. So I came from a flight and I was a little bit tired, and it just was rejuvenating, completely relaxing. And I came out and I felt like I had just taken, an 8-hour nap, and
wow.
I came out of it bright-eyed and bushy-tailed, but at the same time really relaxed. So it was a perfect combination.
Now, as a pharmacist, what happens when you expose your skin to lots of magnesium sulfate, which is Epsom salt?
If you do too much of it, you can have problems, but definitely just swimming in it, you get a lot of magnesium absorbed through the skin, which is really, really nice and calming and relaxing. And most people are actually deficient in magnesium, so a big root cause for headaches and feeling stressed out.
So that could have been some of the reason it felt calm for you, right?
For sure.
It's one of those technologies that I think most people haven't really heard about, but if you're going to go spend an hour getting a massage, maybe if you were going to spend an hour in a float tank, like there's such different modalities, but do you think that there's a a case for the average person doing it occasionally, or is it just kind of too out there? And it's okay to answer.
Oh my, I think I would absolutely do it if you had access to it. So I know a lot of
Yeah.
cities are coming up with float tanks and different types of facilities where you can go and get a floating session. I would highly recommend it instead of doing a massage. You know, it's something completely different. It's a different type of relaxation than when you come
Yeah.
up from a massage.
One of the things about it, and this isn't actually our topic for today, but we're just talking because we did all sorts of biohacking yesterday, is that when people get PTSD, and a lot of people have little things, it's not like they're like, I'm unable to function, but it means that you get these massive triggers that make no sense from some things like flying or heights or something else. And there's some trauma and your nervous system got programmed that way and your amygdala is overactive for that situation. There's studies about floating where people do it and it's such a calming experience that the amygdala can calm down when you do it repeatedly. So they've been even treating some vets with PTSD who are sort of the hard cases for that because they have such big trauma. And they're finding results. So I've found just, I don't know, some kind of peace that comes from being in that womb-like environment.
I could totally see that. I could totally see how that would help anybody. I came with, I came from a long trip and I was a little bit tired and just kind of like antsy, wasn't sure where I was, and it just was totally chill and relaxed.
Okay, so it worked for you.
Oh, absolutely.
And you skipped the cryotherapy, which is kind of the opposite of that, like 270 degrees below zero versus like nice warm water just floating. So I think that might have been a good call.
Yeah, for sure,
Awesome.
for sure.
Well, let's get into some stuff about your latest work on Hashimoto's. And for people listening, Hashimoto's is really, really common. And the reason we're talking about this is that even if you don't have an autoimmune thing here, there's so much for you to learn about because this is really common. It's affecting people around you. But also, this is a regulatory system for the body, and you can learn how to hack it. So we're going to push Izabella's knowledge here and see if we can like trick her up on stuff.
Yeah, let's do it.
Hey, don't get nervous. No. On that front, okay, define Hashimoto's. I know we did in our last podcast, we did that, but a lot of people didn't hear that. So it's like, what is Hashimoto's and how common is it?
So Hashimoto's sounds like an exotic condition, like a Japanese sword fighter or something, but it's actually quite common condition. It was discovered over 100 years ago by a Japanese physician, hence the name. But what it is, it's basically an autoimmune attack of the thyroid gland. And what's happening in Hashimoto's is our immune system begins to attack the thyroid gland as though it was a virus or bacteria or something that's not supposed to be there. Eventually, this leads to a breakdown of thyroid tissue, resulting in hypothyroidism or an underactive thyroid, where you see a lot of people having, the biggest symptoms are going to be fatigue and weight gain, but hair loss and, just feeling depressed can happen. A lot of different things can happen when you have an underactive thyroid. And it's actually a very, very common condition. So, depending on what study you will look at, the estimate rates will say anywhere from 1% to 5%. But all of the recent studies are saying, yeah, it's actually more like 5 to 24% of the population that can be affected with Hashimoto's. We're not necessarily getting tested for it. And the tests that we have are not always the best ones and not always the most accurate ones for Hashimoto's.
So lots of people have all kinds of stuff wrong with them. They don't know anything about it. And if you had Hashimoto's, what are you going to feel?
Oh man, so I have like a slide of what it feels like to have Hashimoto's, and when you think about it, a lot of times the thyroid is our body's metabolism gland. So it runs our whole temperature setting and metabolism throughout our whole body. And every single cell in our body has thyroid receptors. So when you're deficient in thyroid hormone, you're going to have problems across the board. So people with Hashimoto's will feel really, really tired. And it's not like, after you've had a long day and you just get tired and you want to go to bed. It's like, I don't want to get out of bed and do anything with my life tired. It's like apathy. Like I used to be motivated, but now I don't even want to do anything with my life. I'd rather just take a nap.
Like everything's a struggle, right?
Everything is a struggle. Everything is tough. People are asking too many things of you. You get to the point where some people will actually experience anxiety and panic attacks, especially in the early phases, because what's happening is as the thyroid gland is under attack, you start getting dumps of thyroid hormone into your bloodstream, which can shoot up your thyroid hormone levels. So you're almost, some people have been misdiagnosed with bipolar disorder, panic attacks, anxiety attacks. I've seen people hospitalized for psychotic disorders because the thyroid hormones can really mess with your emotions, put you on an emotional roller coaster. That's, you run out of thyroid hormones and then you become depressed. So yeah, so you can look like a person with bipolar disorder because of those fluctuations. And then, with your body, you might be cold intolerant, you might have trouble losing weight or be putting on weight. So, you can have a friend that's eating exactly as much as you are, exercising as much as you are, and because your thyroid is not working properly, you're going to just be putting on weight when they're going to be staying the same weight.
Come on, Izabella. It's about calories in and calories out. Didn't you know that?
Oh, right. Yeah. Yeah, and that's what people hear from their doctors all the time, as people will be going to their doctor, they'll say, hey, I'm not losing weight, my hair's falling out, I'm really tired, I'm really cold, I'm feeling off, and then oftentimes the doctors will say, you need to eat less and exercise more, take this prescription for an antidepressant, come back in a few months. And that's just unfortunate, because a lot of times if you figure out the root causes of the condition, you could really help a person completely turn their life around and just feel like a brand new person.
What happens when someone with a broken thyroid eats less and works out more?
It's a common thing that we see, and a lot of times what's interesting about the thyroid gland, and I kind of have a theory about it, that it helps us. It's basically adaptive physiology. When you think about what the thyroid gland does, it helps to speed things up. It helps us be fertile. It helps us grow hair. It helps us turn over our skin and makes us look, attractive and have lots of energy and all that great stuff. But when we're in a time when there's famine and when there's stress and scarcity and just not a lot of good things happening around in our environment, a lot of toxins and whatnot, it's not really a good time to reproduce, is it?
In my research on reproduction, no. Famines and tigers make us less willing and able to reproduce. Yeah.
Right. So my theory is that the thyroid is our body's way of shutting that down. So if you don't have enough food around, if you're not getting enough nutrients and calories from your environment, then it's probably not the best time to become pregnant and have a baby, because that baby's chances of survival are not going to be the best. And they may have deficiencies which may predispose them to birth defects. So what's interesting is that people in Ireland are now genetically more predisposed to have Hashimoto's, and this is as a result of the potato famine. Because during the potato famine, those who had the genes for Hashimoto's were more likely to survive.
Wow.
Because they didn't burn as many calories, right?
Because their metabolism just shut down, so they felt like crap.
Exactly.
They wanted to sleep all the time. They were cold, but they didn't starve.
They didn't starve. They didn't need to eat as much, and their body held on to all the calories.
Wow.
And so that's what's happening with, basically with Hashimoto's, is the thyroid slows down, and we're holding on to many, many more calories. And if you do that to yourself purposefully, you let's say you stop eating a lot of calories, and our evolutionary system wasn't really familiar with dieting, and then treadmills, right? So you stop eating, and then you get on a treadmill, and what your body thinks is that there's no food around and that you're being chased by a tiger, and so then it shuts down your production of thyroid hormones even more.
So it says conserve energy, and it says why waste energy producing sex hormones? You don't need that. You don't need your period.
Let's survive. Let's work on survival. I'm going to hold on to everything you have. I'm going to do you a huge favor. Mm-hmm. You've got some great fat stores on your body. Let's hold on to those so that you can survive.
This historical thing about why we're wired the way we are, it's interesting. You said up to 24% of people have Hashimoto's, or have the susceptibility to Hashimoto's, or what was it? Just have Hashimoto's, I think?
It's really, really interesting, because looking at the different studies will say anywhere from 5 to 25% actually have Hashimoto's.
Okay.
And there are different stages to Hashimoto's. So the stage 1 is going to be the genetic predisposition. So for all intents and purposes, you're not going to have Hashimoto's, you just have the genes to develop it. You're not going to have changes consistent with Hashimoto's on your thyroid gland. You're not going to have the antibodies. You're not going to have the symptoms. Stage 2 goes into, you start seeing some changes in the thyroid gland, maybe some symptoms. Stage 3 goes into, you're developing thyroid antibodies. You have some subclinical issues. Stage 4, you're looking at getting altered levels of thyroid hormones and profound symptoms. And at stage 5, you're actually moving on to getting additional autoimmune conditions. Mm-hmm. So, for the genetic predisposition part, I saw one very interesting study from Eastern Europe, so people who were exposed to Chernobyl, which I was one of them. I used to live pretty close to the Ukrainian border in Poland. they were looking at rates of thyroid antibodies in children who were in close proximity to the Chernobyl incident and those who were in further proximity. And those that were in closer proximity, about 80% of them actually had thyroid antibodies, which was huge. And in a different part of the Ukraine, which was further removed from the Chernobyl incident, the rates were much, much lower, somewhere in the 20%. And, Ukrainians hypothetically should be genetically similar. So, my theory is that there are, we keep discovering new genes, right? We keep discovering these genes are responsible for this condition. And sure, there are genes that have been associated with Hashimoto's, but I think it is something that definitely turns on when there's a need for it.
Okay. That's such a cool way of thinking about it, that it might have an evolutionary benefit, right? And it reminds me of one thing that's like more general and one thing that's kind of specific to me. So I had Hashimoto's, you did too, which is why we're both kind of interested in this. But it's such a common thing that like I just come across it and people I talk to all the time, I'm like, oh really? Like you have all the symptoms, and then they get a test and lo and behold.
Sure enough, yep.
You're like 1 in 4. Okay, that's a big thing. Well, my grandparents met on the Manhattan Project, like building the bomb. And there's a story from my dad when he was still in the crib. My grandfather came home from Los Alamos labs and had plutonium or uranium, some sort of highly radioactive bad stuff on him. And they found it because their particle detectors noticed that there was this. So they literally followed like footprints to go to his house, found it on the doorknob, found it all over my dad's crib, all over my dad's head, like scrub him down as a baby to get rid of all this radioactive stuff. So I'm like wondering, maybe that's related. Who knows? We'll never know.
It's possible, for sure.
But the other thing that made a lot of sense to me here is I also carry genes that 1 in 28% of people have that make us more susceptible to toxic mold. And this is the topic of Moldy, the documentary. And those genes had an evolutionary benefit. I'm Northern European. The genes are widely distributed across different races. But what we theorized they made you do was, okay, I'm ideal for basically getting on a horse, riding to a town full of people I don't know, basically plundering the town, getting shot by an arrow. So I'm not going to get sick when I go in and I'm exposed to all these things because my immune system is very aggressive. And I'm not going to bleed to death from the arrow because my blood clots quickly. So that's evolutionary benefit. 1,000 years of Northern European history, like, okay, like I'm kind of optimized for that. I'm like 4.5% on Neanderthal even.
Nice.
The overhanging brow and all.
I could see that.
Yeah. I'm 2% alien too. That's different. But
it was more than 2%.
Probably. That's the Roswell side of my family. But what's interesting though is those genes that are of evolutionary benefit in times of famine or times of strife, now we're like, oh look, here's something in the environment like this mold stuff or other things that piss off your immune system. It's like, okay, I'm going to take you down. So when it does that, it attacks your pituitary gland, it attacks your thyroid, and it does all sorts of other things to your body that aren't necessarily of benefit, even though like we don't want to breed those genes out of people because, when the zombie apocalypse comes, then we might not have the benefits of doing that.
Exactly. And, I'm always worried about the zombie apocalypse. And, with Hashimoto's, I think I'll be good with having those genes because they can always turn on in case I need to hide out for a little while.
Yeah. And you and I have been cross-training with throwing axes and crossbows and stuff like that as part of the biohacking, right?
Yeah.
Okay, maybe not.
4 out of 4 for me.
So you've written a book, and I don't think we even talked about the title of the book yet, and we talked about it on the last podcast. But for people who are listening and realizing, okay, like this is an interesting topic. I've read a lot about the thyroid. I've cured my Hashimoto's before we met. You've cured yours. But I have to say, like, yours is the most researched book I've ever seen, and it's also an easy read. And one of the things in there, like, there's all sorts of stuff that I usually know all the weird stuff, but you know more weird stuff than I do. Like, talk about cigarette smoking and Hashimoto's that's in the book. You blew me away when you told me that.
That's really interesting. And the title of the book, it's like the longest title on the whole entire planet. It's like Hashimoto's Lifestyle Interventions for Finding and Treating the Root Cause. So we just call it Hashimoto's the Root Cause. And
you hit the New York Times with that title.
We did, yeah.
That's badass, okay?
So, like very unexpected, very unexpected. They're like, that was the longest title. And so, with cigarettes, it's actually interesting because they did a study in, this Dutch endocrinologist that's kind of like a guru in all of the research in Hashimoto's. And he was trying to look at things that can prevent Hashimoto's. And one of the things that he found was that smoking cigarettes actually prevents Hashimoto's. So we'll see that people who actually quit smoking are going to have higher rates of Hashimoto's than people who are current smokers. And you think, that's so backwards because smoking is horrible for everything. Yet for Hashimoto's, it can be protective. And drinking as well. So drinking and smoking has been found to be protective of Hashimoto's. And in Poland, we have this saying called kto pije I pali, ten nie ma robali, which is he who drinks and smokes does not get bugs.
Wow.
And one of the theories with Hashimoto's is basically that it can be induced by a pathogenic infection. And so through molecular mimicry where, your body thinks that is trying to attack the pathogen and there's something on the pathogen that looks similar to your thyroid gland. So perhaps, smoking may be, the tobacco may be poisoning not just you, but some of these other unfriendly visitors that you have, as well as drinking. Of course, not that we're recommending that, but we do see higher rates when people actually are quitting smoking. You see a higher incidence rate of Hashimoto's, and perhaps that's what's responsible in some people for the weight gain.
So check this out. If you're a smoker, and a lot of people listening to Bulletproof Radio, let's face it, you're probably not a smoker.
Right.
And if you are, you feel guilty about it at least. Because we know that there's overwhelming evidence that it's bad for you. There's also really good evidence about Hashimoto's, which you taught me about, and also about like oxygen levels in the brain. So nicotinic acid, essentially nicotine, is a smart drug, right? And so there are people who self-medicate because they're having problems with oxygen in the brain. And you can now get nicotine without smoking. And my belief is that this will be considered like a smart drug. Like this is something that has benefits. Yes, nicotine is addictive, so is water, depending on how you, you die without it.
Habit forming.
Right. As a pharmacist, like, am I a crazy person for saying that maybe you might want to take a milligram of nicotine every now and then for your brain or for oxygen or for things like that?
I think it can be helpful for some people. With Hashimoto's, what they found is there's an alkaloid in tobacco, and it's anandamide, that can be very, very helpful. And it one of the things that I think it does, it helps to detoxify LPS. So LPS is something that is produced by our gram-negative bacteria, and it basically produces a lot of inflammation in our bodies.
So when you eat the wrong foods or you have the wrong bacteria in your gut, the bacteria make lipopolysaccharide, which is a poison that soaks in through your gut lining, hits the liver, hits the brain. And so you're saying tobacco has this anandamide, which can protect you from it. And you can take supplements with anandamide in it. They're hard to find, but you can do that, right?
They took them off the market.
Oh, those bastards.
I know.
You who took them off the market. We're watching you. We know. All right, so
I have a stash, though, at home. So.
Do you?
Yeah. But
they
took them off the market.
I grow my own tobacco in the garden. Like we grow all of our own food now at my house, which is cool. I don't actually smoke tobacco, but you can like soak it in water or alcohol and make bug spray out of it because nicotine kills bugs. So I have like racks of dried tobacco that are probably cured poorly, and I wouldn't know because I don't really smoke. But can I use should I be like taking a little bit of that somehow to get some anti?
I don't know about that. They actually, one of the reasons they took it off the market is because it's not a straight up extract of a plant. They actually synthesize it in a lab. So that was one of the claims that the FDA made against this company. They basically were saying the company was making drug-like claims for a supplement.
Well, that's because supplements work like drugs, right?
Some of them do, but you can't.
I'm just asking a pharmacist. I'm not saying mine do that, because mine are just supplements. They have no drug effects. You cannot heal anything with anything I make, just for anyone listening, all right?
Right, absolutely. I mean, some supplements are drugs in other countries.
Yeah.
So take that for whatever it is, right? So so a lot of supplements, they do have profound pharmacological effects. I mean, that just makes sense, right? So they have, they can bind receptors very tightly, and they can turn things on and turn things off. And they're not necessarily going to be regulated as drugs. With anandamide, they actually had studies that showed the anandamide was reducing thyroid antibodies and reducing a lot of inflammation for a subset of people. Not everybody, but some people did really, really well with it. And I think they had a Johns Hopkins researcher on one of those studies, and they ended up pulling it off of the market. And I think the company, the last I looked at their press release, they were looking at making it into a drug and getting it through the whole process.
Wow.
We'll see.
It's kind of a painful thing, because if you make a really effective supplement, you're not allowed to say what it does, because then it might be a drug, and then you're looking at least like $10 million to take something that already works. Even if you have studies on it, you have to go through this incredible rigmarole. and then it ends up costing a lot of money and being mixed with like weird chemicals to become a drug versus something that was like available in your garden inside tobacco. That's a tough thing for consumers because costs go way up, and you might, like I have Hashimoto's now. I don't want to wait 10 years for something to reach this meandering approval process if it would help me now. Absolutely.
Yeah, and there's so many things out there that are really, really helpful, like N-acetylcysteine can be very, very helpful for Hashimoto's and a lot of different compounds, but you can't really make, if you're somebody that's selling them, you really can't make any claims about it. So it's almost like people have to do their own research and hack themselves to try to figure out what's working for them. And it's very hard to find.
It's a complex thing, and I get this question a lot. You do too, I think, from people who read your materials, where they're like, okay, what can I trust? What can I not trust? Because everyone knows tobacco's bad for you, but wait, nicotine could be helpful, and anandamide could be helpful, and there's probably some other antioxidant-based things in there that we just don't know about. But heaven forbid anyone do anything with tobacco, because that's a highly regulated substance. So let's say that someone's like, all right, I'm smoking or I'm chewing, and I'm not going to be able to access all the science or all the chemicals in my tobacco because there's laws against that, but I want to quit smoking and I don't want to get Hashimoto's. What would you tell them to do?
Definitely get on some antioxidants. So selenium is something that's been found to reduce thyroid antibodies by a great amount. It helps to reduce the oxidative stress that occurs when thyroid hormones are produced. So that can be very, very helpful. N-acetylcysteine is another thing that I like to recommend. So it's actually a pretty high dosage. You want to do something like 900 to 1,800 milligrams of that with food to help you along with that.
Is that because of glutathione production?
Exactly. So that's actually a glutathione precursor, and that turns into glutathione in the body, and a lot of people have found that to be very, very helpful and helps them detoxify, making sure you're doing a zinc supplement.
Let's pause for 1 second. For people listening, if you haven't heard of glutathione, glutathione is the primary antioxidant detoxing chemical in your liver, and I do make a glutathione product that's orally absorbable, but the idea here is by increasing levels of that, you can just help yourself maintain healthy detox levels and things like that. So NAC, which we're talking about, N-acetylcysteine, is a compound that's a precursor to glutathione. So you can take vitamin C plus N-acetylcysteine, or maybe also alpha-lipoic acid, and these things can combine in your liver to naturally manufacture more, or you can take an external source. The holy grail for this stuff, and something that I do whenever I get a chance, is intravenous. You can actually get a quick injection of glutathione, which raises levels, makes you feel great for days. If I fly like across the country and I'm going to get on some TV show or something, I always stop off and I get a glutathione injection, because it really, really changes how you feel. And it doesn't matter how strong you are. When you get more glutathione, it makes you stronger and more resilient. So that's what we're talking about, if that's a new term for you. So sorry, kind of a quick aside there, but some people just haven't heard of all these chemicals.
And it's quite an amazing feeling when you actually get glutathione into your system. So.
Have you done a glutathione IV?
I have done that before. It's more convenient to take it as a pill, obviously.
A lot more,
So yeah, and then the liposomal glutathione can be very, very effective as well. But you have to make sure you get a really high quality supplement, like the kind you make. Otherwise,
thank you. You don't have to plug the Bulletproof stuff.
Well,
I'll do that for you. Okay.
No. Well, I was going to say because some of the other people can get glutathione supplements that are just not going to be effective.
Oh, just the pills, yeah.
Right. Yeah.
And that was something that I used to do when I first started, like 10 plus years ago, working with glutathione. Like, you take the pills, they get digested, and then you just essentially get some sulfur, and they don't do anything.
Yep.
And then you have liposomes where they can absorb in the oral mucosa, and then you have what we're doing, which is a pharmaceutical process, so it absorbs in the mucosa and in the gut, which is why we talk about like 5 times better absorption. But it's one of those things where it's complex, and delivery systems end up being as important as the molecule for almost every supplement. In fact, I want to talk to you about that. We just decided a few minutes ago, oh my God, we're in the same town, we're like hanging out, we have to do another podcast. Everyone on earth talks about, at least everyone in supplements, I'm probably generalizing, there's tablets, and I don't like swallowing tablets, and they're crunchy and they don't absorb very well. They've been called bedpan bullets because they pass all the way through people in hospitals. But then we have all these different capsule materials for making capsules. So you're like a pro in pills because you're a licensed pharmacist. So what is the deal with all the binding agents on these things? Should we worry about magnesium stearate? Should we have vegetarian capsules? Should we have gelatin capsules? Like give me the download.
It just really depends on the person, and I highly recommend doing like very high quality supplement brands, because if you're going to be going to like a Walmart and picking up the supplements on that shelf, then your chances are they're not going to be in the active usable form. So a lot of times they're going to be kind of the cheap versions. Then they're going to put supplements together that can compete for absorbing with each other. And a lot of times they'll put fillers. So some different fillers are not going to be properly absorbed by people, and they can prevent you from actually breaking down the supplement. So, some people will see, capsules in their poop, and they won't actually digest their supplements correctly and break them down into usable parts. So you always want to go with something that's hypoallergenic and that's very low on any kinds of fillers.
So is magnesium stearate an okay filler?
I know it's a controversial topic. For me, I don't think it's as big of an issue as people make out of it.
We're in alignment on that one. Magnesium stearate is basically made from stearic acid, one of the most common fatty acids that's out there. And I know a thing or two about fatty acids because we make brain octane, and like it's an important part of my own healing was getting the right amounts of fat and the right types of fat. And so you look at this stuff and you're like, okay, is it harmful? And the couple studies say it's harmful are like, if you drowned in it, it's harmful. There's so much involved at the amounts we do. I don't really use it in the vast majority of my products, but sometimes to make it so you can swallow it, you just have to put something in there like that, or it's going to cost customers 2 or 3 times as much with no benefit. And I try to respect the pocketbook of people. I never make something more expensive than it needs to be to work. And so I'm always looking at delivery systems. So that's one thing. You don't think magnesium stearate is particularly harmful. I don't either. And there is debate on that. Like that's totally like a clear thing. So like, please, if you're listening to this, you want to go to YouTube and yell at me for saying magnesium stearate is in the doses we use is probably safe. It's okay. You can yell at me. It's all right. Like we're acknowledging there's debate, but I'm on that side of the debate, which makes me a bad person or not. I don't know. It shouldn't make anyone a person or not. But okay. Now let's say that you're going to take some vitamin C. And we have in this hand vitamin C and MHCP, vegetarian capsules. And in this hand, we have gelatin capsules. Which one are you going to take?
I actually don't know that answer.
Okay.
Sorry.
No, that's okay. This is really funny.
I like chewable capsules I like chewable vitamin, or I do chewable, or I put it in like the powder form from from food sources.
So chewable or powder form, okay.
Yeah.
So with ascorbic acid, vitamin C, if you chew it, it'll take the enamel off your teeth. So we'd have to buffer it with some baking soda, and then it would be froth at the mouth, and it wouldn't be so attractive. But
I don't take that one.
All right. So the reason I'm asking here is there are a group of people. Oh, it has to be a vegetarian capsule, and then some people say that's bad. My perspective, and I'm just sharing this with people listening, because believe it or not, like this matters. You're going to spend $50 on a bottle of some kind of supplement that's going to give you a noticeable benefit. And if you don't feel it, maybe it's also benefiting you because you have the lab data that you don't feel. Whatever it is, $50 is $50. You could make an optimal decision. You're going to swallow the pill in choice A, choice B. And my whole perspective on the Bulletproof thing is like, look, you had to do something. You might as well do the thing that didn't take any more effort, that gave you a little bit more benefit, or caused less damage. So there's like a damage avoidance, like avoid small amounts of toxins that don't make you stronger. Like it's just smart. So to make that decision right, I've looked at this a lot, and I came down to this basic conclusion. MHCP, which is the stuff vegetarian capsules are made out of, is probably good for you and certainly not harmful. At the same time, gelatin, which other capsules are made from, is also not bad for you and probably good for you. In fact, I make collagen, which uses grass-fed gelatin, much higher quantities of it. But the gelatin capsule, it might not be made from grass-fed gelatin, but it doesn't matter. You're taking like a quarter of, I don't know, like maybe 100 milligrams worth of gelatin. It's so tiny that it's unlikely to have any effect on you at all. So I don't really care, and they both break down in water easily. But I would also say if you have a choice between a pressed tablet and a capsule in either flavor, you should always take the capsule because you're probably going to have more absorption. But I'm not a pharmacist, which is why I'm asking you, because you might have like great insights on other kinds of delivery systems. You like powders and chewables. Why?
Because they get broken down.
So you want the salivary enzymes to start working on the stuff?
Right, yeah.
Okay.
So you don't have to, some people may have deficiencies in enzymes as things go down, so they may not be able to properly break down the tablets until they get to a different part of the body.
Okay.
So I like for vitamin C, but yeah, definitely. Now I understand, I'm sorry, I don't think I understood what you were asking, but yeah, definitely, whether they're veggie caps or gel caps, that doesn't make a difference.
Okay.
Yeah.
And so for anything, but it's possible there's some autoimmune thing, but for gelatin versus essentially vegetable gelatin-like stuff, I don't know of any allergy things going on there unless maybe it's, a bovine gelatin and you're allergic to beef gelatin. It's not impossible, but
that would be pretty rare.
Yeah.
That would be something pretty rare. What I get concerned about is when people have like gluten or different types of fillers, or they have lactose or something like that in their supplements, because that can, even tiny amounts can really affect the person in their ability to extract the contents of the supplement if they're sensitive to that, because that'll just cause more inflammation and prevent you from absorbing it.
It's amazing. As I work on some new formulas, I have some new supplement stuff. I only want to make things that I can't buy somewhere else, because if there's something perfectly good on the market, you might as well just get that.
Absolutely.
And a lot of the formulators I work with, and a lot of people don't know this, but what you do is you're like, okay, here's the idea, here's the chemistry, but to take the chemistry and the idea and then to bring it forth to actually manufacture it, there's a lot of steps in there. So you work with formulators who can help you identify the companies that can do the steps so that you can bring this idea to light. It's a lot like writing software or developing some other product. All these things have to come together in the right order at the right time in order to get something that works. And it's actually way more fun than writing software. But in order to do that, you do all this research, and I'm constantly working with formulators where it's like, okay, here's what we want to do, here's the characteristics, here's the technology, and then they're like, oh look, I put sodium caseinate in there, which is a form of casein which triggers dairy allergies, especially in people with Hashimoto's, and then tons of other people don't know it. And you're like, really? Did you not look at any of it? And I sort of just want to pull my hair out. But I think when I go back to Silicon Valley software times, it's like, oh, you didn't document your code. You wrote it in a sloppy way. And I'm hoping that there'll be changes there. But that's on supplements. When you look at if you were working at a pharmacy still and you were to look at the package insert on drugs, how often do you find these binders that you wouldn't allow in a supplement?
So very commonly. A lot of times you'll have a lot of additives in medications, like colorings that should not be there, that can set off a lot of reactions in people. Some people, we'll see a lot of people who are sensitive to thyroid medications because of the colorings in them.
Oh, wow.
You'll have lactose in some of the thyroid medications, and some people will be sensitive to the lactose-containing ingredient, and then you'll see gluten, which is a big deal. There's potential for cross-reactivity. And I would highly recommend everybody check out, there's a website called glutenfreemeds.com where you can look for your medications to make sure they're gluten-free. Or a lot of times, sometimes people will be taking a medication and they'll be on a great gluten-free diet, but they still won't be getting better. And it'll be actually gluten in the medications. Wow. So sometimes you may need to work with a compounding pharmacist to get the medications compounded for you. One of the things that I found with compounded medications is there's a few different fillers that you can use. One of them is known as Methicel, and that can cause, it's a suspended release version where it can suspend the release of the medication over time. And a lot of people with gut issues may not be able to properly absorb that filler. So a lot of times you'll see people when they take a medication containing Methicel, they may not absorb any of it. So just knowing the different fillers and always asking, your pharmacist or looking at your supplements or asking for the package insert to see what fillers are in there is going to be a great start. If you're taking a medication, if you're taking a supplement, you're not getting the results that you want.
Let's talk about compounding pharmacies for a little while, because you and I know what they are, but I'm guessing that 80% of people listening right now are like, what's a compounding pharmacy? Because unless you have an alternative or a functional medicine kind of doctor, you probably never had a script from one. What is a compounding pharmacy?
Oh, compounding pharmacies are really, really great. When you walk into a compounding pharmacy, you immediately will feel like you're being transported back into the 1930s when pharmacists used to make most of their medications from scratch. And that's what a compounding pharmacy is. It's basically customized dosages, customized formulations, and customized medications that may not be commercially available, that these pharmacists are making from scratch for a doctor's order for a specific patient. So it's really quite neat because you can get a lot of drugs that are not FDA approved. So for orphan conditions or off-label conditions that you may not have access to. One of my favorite sources of knowledge is compounding pharmacists because they just have so many cool secret protocols that you can find out about.
I've learned a lot from compounding pharmacists as well. And was that something that you practiced or that you sort of paid attention to in your pharmacy training? I know that most pharmacists in the West are like, bleh, we don't like compound pharmacists. They're like competition for some reason. And I'm not sure why there's, what's it called, bad blood.
It's very old school. So pharmacists are trying to move away from dispensing medications. They want to provide more patient education and things like that. And they want to do more of the, medication management rather than the medication dispensing. So they're kind of like, oh, that's old school. We're doing other things now. But yeah, I was actually very lucky because I had courses in compounding in pharmacy school as well as rotations.
Oh, cool.
And so most pharmacists nowadays will not have had that exposure.
So I've worked a lot with compounding pharmacists, just as I have historically on my own health. And it's kind of amazing. You go in there and they're like, oh yeah, we could make that. So they're like buying raw materials and they do stuff that is really, really neat and that you just can't buy. And it's not that hard to do what they're doing in that you don't need like, a giant $200 million manufacturing facility to make some of these things. It's oftentimes just very careful dosing and doing things like thyroid can be compounded. And when you do that sort of thing, if they do it right, it can be more absorbable and more beneficial and avoid the bad things. So I've had great luck with it. And it can also be a problem. Like one time I had, I don't know if it was a filling mistake. I think it was actually just like a paperwork mistake, not that they filled it wrong. But it's kind of funny. It's thyroid related.
Drug error.
We're talking about like if your thyroid is off.
Yeah.
It's kind of a funny story. I just thought of it. This was a couple years ago. I went to something called Summit Outside. This is the Summit series in Utah and Powder Mountain.
Oh yeah, Powder Mountain.
And it was like one of the coolest things I've ever done. They had a table set for 800 people in a meadow, this long table. And just by random chance, I got to sit at the head of the table with the CEO of Connect.com, my friend Anima. And we're sitting there just like looking down the table. And it was just like something you'll never do again. It was crazy. And part of that was you're staying up late. They had like a full stage with like dancing and I had vodka, which is like the cleanest alcohol. And so I was up late partying 3 nights at like 9,000 feet elevation, kind of inflammatory. And I flew straight to San Francisco and I did a photo shoot for Creative Live where I have a course on bulletproof stuff. And part of that was they wanted me to hold plank pose, essentially like an inch off the floor on the bulletproof vibe. So 30 times a second, I'm vibrating, holding this crazy position.
Take the picture.
And I'm like, for God's sake, but they just were like diddling with the cameras. And if anyone's tried that, that is a really strenuous exercise. And then I flew home. So it was not biologically a good thing. I was taking my glutathione and everything else, but you can only do so much, especially with alcohol and altitude. And my thyroid had been overfilled. So I was getting more thyroid than I wanted. So the day after I get back, I'm like, I'm having some weird chest pain. Now, the chest pain came from the rib heads in my sternum being irritated by vibrating for like way longer than any sane person would do these exercises. So I'm getting pain here that was really strong pain. And then my wife, Dr. Lana, the ER physician, listens to my heartbeat and she's like, oh, you got a couple skipped beats. Like, that's not so good. Because of the thyroid meds, right? Overactive thyroid will do that. So I'm feeling a little bit anxious. I have chest pain and I have skipping heartbeats. And like, what would you do if someone had that?
I would definitely recommend that they have their thyroid labs tested to make sure that they're not overdosed on their medications.
Right. But with chest pain, and it's like, oh, look, like today I feel like crap. I have chest pain and skipping heartbeats. Normally you like go to the emergency room, right?
Oh, definitely. If it was like if it was a person who was,
So that's what I did. And like, we'll go to the emergency room and get an EKG. And they're like, there's nothing wrong. We don't see anything. Like, but I had skipped heartbeats just this morning. Well, I take my thyroid meds in the morning. So we figured it out the second day. When it happened again, I'm like, my heart's racing, I feel bad. And then we realized, okay, so this is unrelated symptoms. And these unrelated symptoms, though, can be really weird. And that's the problem with Hashimoto's or with any kind of thyroid condition. It's like it affects the core of who you are because the amount of energy that you have, and if it's too much, you're like, oh my God, And if it's too little, it's also like everything is hard or everything is stressful. What are some other nutritional things though, that people might do to just, even if they don't have Hashimoto's, but just to keep their thyroids healthy?
So,
what would you do?
So from a food perspective, definitely gluten-free, dairy-free. So we did have a remission story with the Bulletproof diet. The other diets that people find very, very helpful are going to be like the paleo diet, autoimmune paleo diet, looking at removing the reactive foods. So a lot of times people with Hashimoto's will have multiple food sensitivities.
And they don't know it, right?
They just don't know it. So my biggest one was dairy and gluten, and I had like acid reflux, and I had all these like joint pains and IBS and whole mess of symptoms. And basically people, I did a survey of 2,232 of my readers, and 88% of them reported feeling better on a gluten-free diet.
Wow.
There were 12 that didn't see a difference, but we're actually working with a statistician to kind of look at what were the reasons why those 12% didn't get better. Maybe, some people actually need to be off of more than just gluten to feel better. So that's where I usually start people, is looking at getting your diet optimized. So eating a nutrient-dense diet that has plenty of good fats, plenty of really great sources of protein. So, I don't recommend doing anything like soy or anything, that can be inflammatory to the thyroid gland. And that's a really, really great start for most people. Some people can...
What if you don't? So if you don't have any symptoms and you start doing these things, is that likely to be protective? Is that going to support you better?
Absolutely. Okay. So if you have a family history of Hashimoto's, which a lot of people may do, so that puts you at greater risk of it. So especially if you have, like your kids, having a male relative with Hashimoto's is going to put them at greater risk than having a female relative. And it's much more common in women than it is in men. So putting them preventatively on a gluten-free, dairy-free diet is going to be very, very helpful. Making sure that people have enough selenium on board. Selenium is one of the most important nutrients within the thyroid gland. Vitamin D levels, so having low levels of vitamin D have been implicated in just about every autoimmune condition. And recent paper came out on the correlation between vitamin D levels and Hashimoto's severity and Hashimoto, and whether or not you move into hypothyroid. So you definitely want to make sure that your vitamin D levels are optimized. And my clients that go into remission, every one of them has had really good vitamin D levels, and every one of them at the beginning does not. So that's something that we really need to work on. B12 levels is another common deficiency in Hashimoto's. Looking at ferritin. So ferritin is the iron storage protein that is super, super important for thyroid function. And that's going to be commonly depleted in Hashimoto's, and getting that to a good level is going to be helpful for symptoms, for prevention, as well as for getting into remission. Those are the big things I look at from a testing perspective. As far as, just taking supplements, magnesium can be very, very helpful. The selenium can be very helpful. Thiamine is a B vitamin that a lot of people with fatigue, with thyroid-related fatigue or any kind of, I recently had somebody with celiac disease or Crohn's disease where they're doing all the right things. They're on the right diet. They're, gluten-free, dairy-free, and they're still, for some reason, fatigued. Taking a thiamine supplement can be a huge difference. So thiamine can be helpful in helping us regulate our blood pressure and regulating our ability to tolerate carbohydrates and definitely energy levels. The key is to actually take a higher level of thiamine. So usually the RDA is going to be pretty low, and you're looking at taking somewhere around 600 milligrams of thiamine.
So quite a lot.
And within 3 days, that can really turn fatigue around. So there's a few studies that have been done on that, and I've had quite a few success stories with just the use of thiamine, where you're like, okay, I'm doing my diet right. Being on a grain-free diet and gluten-free diet can actually deplete you of thiamine. So that's something that we'll see when people keep struggling, where they'll have, I'm on the right diet, I'm doing everything well, but my adrenals are still shot and my thyroid's still shot and I'm still tired. What more do I need to do? And sometimes it's as easy as taking a thiamine supplement. So those are really, really important things, making sure you have enough micronutrients on board. I already mentioned zinc a little bit earlier, but that's an important one to consider because it helps with a lot of thyroid function, conversion of thyroid hormone to the more active version. And gut function. So these are all things that are pretty basic, but not a lot of people are getting them. So it's your basic vitamins.
I've got two more kind of short questions for you before we run out of time. One of them is that I've had a bunch of people, after they start drinking Bulletproof coffee, just say that they need to lower their thyroid medication. And sometimes it's pretty fast. And is there something that you would know about as a pharmacist that would explain why that is? Is it just increases in healthy fat? Is it like a mitochondrial thing? Like, why would someone, when they make a dietary change to include more fat and more of the brain octane oil, which is an unusual kind of fat, or coffee, like why would they need less thyroid meds? Or is that just random? I'm not claiming that Bulletproof coffee does that. I'm just like, several people have asked me about this, so I lowered it and I lowered my thyroid meds and I felt better.
So I guess my question for them would be, were they on a different coffee before?
That's a very interesting question. So most of them were on a different coffee before. So it might be like avoiding something that's pissing off their immune system. What could that be?
So yeah, there could be some toxins in the coffee. So there are some coffees that are cross-reactive with gluten, and they've been tested to be with that. So some people will drink,
there's only one coffee that's been tested. I checked. It was instant coffee, which is one of the molds. In fact, even in Europe, instant coffee is allowed to be moldy, way more moldy than European normal coffee. And in the US, there's no standards at all, so we know it's moldy. So it was moldy coffee that was tested.
So potentially, if they were drinking that kind of coffee and they switched to a high-quality coffee like Bulletproof, then they would no longer have that cross-reactive issue.
So lack of toxins meant they might need less thyroid meds.
The other question would be asking them if they had, potentially any kinds of history of Epstein-Barr virus, or any history of yeast overgrowth. So Epstein-Barr virus can be a potential root cause of Hashimoto's. And we do know that, coconut oil, MCT oil can be helpful with breaking down the viral coating. So that can help our bodies attack and take care of the virus better. So potentially that could be something that the MCT oil may have helped with.
And specifically, brain octane has that subset of MCT, which, because some MCTs don't even metabolize the same way as that stuff. But the brain octane has strong antifungal effects as well. So if you have candida yeast going on,
which can be a root cause.
That could be what's triggering their immune system to attack the thyroid. Would be the yeast itself.
Or the Epstein-Barr virus. So it does have some antiviral properties, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah, there's some studies about that, but no studies of my products like that.
None of your products, but just in general. So that could be one reason. And then I would also ask them if it was something that they saw on test results, so if they actually became clinically hyperthyroid or if they just felt better, because some people may just take thyroid medications to symptoms. And in that case, getting more energy for sure would be helping them to reduce their thyroid medications. Some people just take them because they feel tired. So, there could be a couple of different root causes, and I always like to look at, what's changed and looking at all of the different variables to determine, which one is helping, which one is harming, what's the most probable root cause and what's the most probable solution, and heck, that's helping.
There's one last question, and you already answered it, but I'm going to ask it again because you probably answered differently. Given all the stuff we talked about and all the other stuff that and you've led a really interesting life, what are your 3 most important pieces of advice for people who want to perform better? So it doesn't have to be thyroid or anything else like that, but if you want to kick ass, do these 3 things.
One is be a rebel. So don't do what everybody else says. Do what you want to do. So don't let people tell you that you need to have a specific job, that you need to do something health-wise. Listen to yourself, listen to your body, and just be a rebel and honor yourself. Be who you want to be. The other one is from my brother, his name's Robert. He's a big fan of your show.
Hi, Robert.
Yeah. So his thing is he's an engineer, and he's always working on himself and working on cars and always engineering things. And he says, sometimes you have to just put the hood down and drive. So we can be doing a lot of self-improvement work, and we just, sometimes we can get stuck in that, but sometimes you just need to put the hood down and drive and enjoy what you have. So I know a lot of biohackers and your followers in the Bulletproof diet are super into that, and just taking pride in what you've come to, what you've accomplished, celebrating your successes. So, I work with people who've been sick for a very long time, and they have a laundry list of symptoms. But, when you get rid of 2 symptoms and you only have 10 left, celebrate that. Yeah. Put the hood down, do a little driving and enjoy your shiny new car, or, enjoy that. And with increased performance, celebrate those successes. So that's probably number 2. And then number 3, I'm going to keep as the same. So, just find somebody as crazy as you are, because helping you support your passions and somebody who has the same passions as you or similar passions so that you can grow together. So if you're looking for a life partner, make sure they're just as passionate, as crazy as you are, because that'll make your life so much more rewarding and happy.
You definitely pulled that last one off. So.
Oh, yeah, definitely.
Now, thank you for being on Bulletproof Radio. Tell everyone the name of your book, that incredible mouthful of a title that it is, as well as your URL so people can find out about you. You're really knowledgeable, and your background as a pharmacist, I think, really lends something to just the whole conversation online, because a lot of people don't have that background. They're either physicians or coaches of some sort, but you have a unique perspective and a lot of good research. So book and URL.
So it's Hashimoto's Thyroiditis, Lifestyle Interventions for Finding and Treating the Root Cause. And then my website is thyroidpharmacist.com. So that's pretty easy and short.
All right. And Izabella Wentz, thank you for being on the show today.
Thank you so much, Dave. It was a pleasure.
If you like today's show, you know what to do. Check out Izabella's work and just look at it. It's totally, totally worth your time to read about this. And I guarantee you that if you're sitting in a room and you look to your left, you look to your right, and there's at least 4 people there, the odds are pretty high that one of those 4 has Hashimoto's and probably doesn't know it. This is one of those things where the incidence is so big that it's worth understanding. And even if you don't have it, even if you have limitless energy and effortless energy all the time, which is pretty rare these days, you're going to be able to help someone else when they talk about this. So there's not a lot of downside to learning about something that's as common as 1 in 4 people. If it's 1 in 1,000, that's pretty specialized, but we're talking about huge swaths of the population. So thanks for listening. And use this knowledge to help yourself or help someone else, and that's what you can do.